That night, they lit the candles for the other daughter and told me to smile for the photo. I left with bare feet, a sketchbook, and $600. 3 years later, they walked into a grand opening in the clouds, then froze when they saw my name etched on the bronze plaque of a $10 million penthouse. They came to steal the spotlight. I came to flip the old switch off and turn the lights on somewhere new. My name is Rosemary Castillo. Today I am 18 years old, and I am invisible. I am standing in the center of my own backyard in Scottsdale, Arizona, watching a party that was supposed to be mine. The air is thick, that specific late May desert humidity that promises a brutal summer. It smells like irrigated money, the sharp green perfume of damp Palo Verde trees, the cloying sweetness of the night-blooming cereus my mother loves, and underlying it all, the clean, woody scent of fresh cedar chips. My father, Richard, insisted on the cedar. "It keeps the dust down. Rosie," he'd said, "gotta look good for the photos." The photos are happening now. Flashes strobe across the yard, turning the scene into a series of jerky silent film snapshots. But the cameras are not pointed at me. They are aimed at my sister, Ava. The party is perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. I should know. I planned most of it. I'm the one who spent 6 hours yesterday balanced on a rickety aluminum ladder, stringing thousands of tiny fairy lights across the skeletal arms of the saguaro cacti. They glitter now, like constellations trapped beneath the indigo sky. I'm the one who curated the playlist, a precise mix of chill indie and soft pop that is currently being drowned out by a DJ I've never seen. I'm the one who spent 2 weeks agonizing over the color swatches, finally settling on champagne blush for the ribbons and the linens. And the cake, it's a masterpiece. 4 tiers of architectural buttercream, frosted in that exact shade of blush. It's the centerpiece of the main patio, and right on top, in gleaming metallic gold script, it reads, "Happy 18th, Ava." The number 18, rendered in enormous shimmering gold balloon-style font, stands proudly beside her name. Ava is 21. My mother, Genevieve, finds me. I feel her presence before I see her, a sudden drop in temperature, a waft of her expensive, citrus-sharp perfume. She glides across the patio, her linen dress immaculate, her smile fixed and brilliant. She looks like the perfect hostess. She is the perfect hostess. "Rosemary, darling." Her voice is a low, urgent murmur, pitched to slide beneath the noise of the party. Her fingers, cool and weighted with rings, find the soft skin of my inner arm. She squeezes. It is not a gesture of affection, it is a warning. "Stop hovering by the cake, you look pouty." I try to pull my arm away, but her grip tightens. "You're making people uncomfortable. Go get a drink, mingle, don't bother the guests." I am the ghost at my own feast. I look past her, searching for my father. Richard is by the new outdoor bar he just had installed, the one with the granite countertop and the built-in wine fridge. He's laughing, a booming sound that's too loud. His face flushed. He's telling a story to his golf buddies, gesturing wildly with his glass of scotch. He catches my eye across the yard. He sees the look on my face. He pauses. He raises his glass in a sloppy, half-hearted toast, his smile faltering for just a second. Then he mouths the words I've heard my entire life. "Next time. Rosie, it'll be your turn next time." He turns back to his friends. The story resumes. The laughter rings out. Next time is a mythical date in the Castillo household, a floating holiday that never quite arrives. The DJ, a man with overly coiffed hair and a microphone, climbs onto the small, temporary stage I had helped my father build. "All right, Scottsdale," his voice booms, artificially amplified. "Are we having a good time tonight?" A scattered, drunken cheer rises from the 100 guests milling around our pool. "I cannot hear you," he shouts. A louder cheer. "That's more like it. Now, are we ready to make some noise for the real star of the night? The birthday girl." My heart, stupid and conditioned for hope, gives a painful little lurch. Maybe this is it. Maybe this was the surprise my mother mentioned, the reason they needed me out of the house all afternoon. Maybe this is the moment they say, "Fooled you," and another cake appears, this one with my name. I take half a step forward, moving out from the shadow of the bougainvillea trellis. The DJ beams. "Everybody put your hands together for the one, the only, Ava." The spotlight, which I had assumed was for the stage, slams on. It doesn't hit the stage. It finds Ava, positioned perfectly on the top step of the patio, descending like a goddess from Olympus. She is wearing a liquid silver sequin dress that glitters so brightly it hurts my eyes. It drinks the light from the stars, from the fairy lights I hung, and reflects it back, amplified. The crowd surges forward. They are a single entity, drawn to the light, to her. And in that surge, someone's shoulder, I think it's Tiffany, Ava's best friend, slams into me, hard. It knocks me off balance. I stumble backward, off the flagstone patio step and onto the soft, sharp bed of cedar chips. I am literally pushed out of the frame. The camera flashes begin. It's not one or two. It's a barrage. Pop, 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 pop. A rapid-fire assault, turning the world into a series of bleached-out, frozen images. Ava posing, Ava laughing, Ava blowing a kiss, Ava grabbing the microphone from the DJ. "Oh my God! You guys!" she screams, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. "This is, like, the best 18th birthday I have ever had." The crowd roars. She's 21. I steady myself on the edge of the main catering table. My hand lands on a crisp linen napkin. My fingers brush against a centerpiece, a cascade of roses and peonies, and ribbon, yards of champagne blush ribbon that I tied. My fingernails, which I painted this morning in a pale, hopeful shade of white, dig into the tablecloth. I can feel the weave of the fabric under my skin. The sound of the world goes distant, muffled, like I've been pushed underwater. I hear the high-pitched squeal of Ava's friends. I hear the rhythmic thump of the bass from the speakers. I hear the sharp, clear clink-clink of champagne glasses toasting. I smell the cedar again, crushed under my heel, and the metallic, sulfurous tang of the fog machine that someone rolled out onto the lawn. Two women, friends of my mother, drift past me, their glasses full. They don't see me. I am 3 feet away, but I am completely invisible. "Genevieve has just outdone herself," one whispers to the other, her eyes on Ava. "This is stunning. Honestly, it's so much better than her actual 18th. She really did a better job this year." "This year." The other woman nods, taking a sip. "Well, you know what they say, practice makes perfect." They laugh, a light, tinkling sound, and move toward the bar. They don't recognize me. They don't remember that 3 years ago. Ava's actual 18th birthday was a pool party that got rained out. They don't know that today, May 24th, is my birthday. I look back at the cake, that beautiful, 4-tiered lie. The light from the fairy strings I hung reflects in the glossy buttercream. I see the golden letters, AVA, shimmering. They seem to float, to burn themselves into my retinas. The world narrows, the noise fades, until there is nothing but those 3 letters, AVA. My mother's voice from 2 nights ago echoes in my head, suddenly sharp and clear through the fog. I had found the invitation proof on her desk, celebrating Ava. I had asked her why. "Rosemary, don't be difficult," she'd said, not looking up from her laptop. "Ava is just sensitive right now. She's having a hard time. This will be good for her. Don't confuse everyone by making it about you. Don't confuse everyone." The phrase is a key turning in a locked door. It clicks. I finally understand. My role in this family is not to be seen, not to be celebrated. My role is to be the quiet one, the steady one, the background. My purpose is to not cause confusion. My presence here, expecting anything, my heart aching for a single happy birthday, that is the confusion. My existence is the typo in their perfect narrative. I am holding a glass. It's filled with water. I don't remember picking it up. My hand is shaking, not violently, just a fine, electric tremor. I watch a single bead of condensation roll down the side of the glass and drip onto the bodice of my white dress, the dress I bought 2 weeks ago, the one I'd saved for, the one I thought was my birthday dress. It leaves a small, dark spot over my heart. I set the glass down on the table. I place it deliberately on a coaster, next to the ribbon I tied. The sound it makes is finite, a soft, definitive click on the linen. I turn my head. I look right at the center of the chaos, the eye of the storm. Ava is now trying to spray a bottle of champagne over the crowd, her silver dress flashing. My mother is clapping, her face a perfect, porcelain mask of maternal pride. My father is filming the whole thing on his phone, beaming. I lean in close to the cake, close enough to feel the waxy heat from the candles that are not for me, close enough to smell the sugar. "Happy birthday to me," I whisper. The words are soundless. I feel them on my lips, but they make no noise. Then I turn my back. I turn my back on the cake, on the spotlight, on the family that sees me as a logistical problem. I walk. I walk away from the light. I walk past the bar, past the laughing, faceless guests, past the cedar chip walkways that were supposed to look good in photos. The photographer, the professional, is panning his camera, following Ava as she stumbles off the stage. For a split second, his lens crosses me. The autofocus probably struggles. He captures the back of my white dress, my shoulders straight, walking toward the deep, unlit darkness of the side yard. He probably thinks I'm staff, heading out for a break. He pans back to Ava. No one notices. No one ever notices. I reach the side gate. It's heavy, black wrought iron, scrolled and ornate. I slide the latch. It's heavy, rusted from the monsoon rains. It makes a loud, metallic, grating scrape in the quiet of the side yard. For a second, I freeze. Sure, that sound will bring someone running. But the music swells. The DJ shouts again, and the sound is swallowed. I pull the gate open. It groans. I step through, onto the gravel of the front driveway. The stones are sharp, biting into the thin soles of my sandals. I stop. I look back one last time. Through the bars of the gate, I can see the party. It looks like a painting, all light and color and movement, beautiful and vibrant and completely unreal. A soundstage, a performance. I bend down. My hands are steady now. I unstrap the thin leather buckle on my left sandal. I slide it off my foot. I do the same with the right. I place them neatly, side by side, on the gravel, a small, sad offering to the life I am leaving. I open the gate just enough to slip through. Then I close it behind me. The latch clicks shut with the quiet finality of a closing door. I am Rosemary Castillo. I am 18 years old. I am standing barefoot on the hot gravel, and I am leaving tonight. I will not wait for next time. My bare feet made no sound on the asphalt as I walked away from the house on Via del Sol. The gravel of the driveway had been the worst part. The pavement of the street, still holding the day's heat, felt almost welcoming by comparison. It was just after 10 p.m. The party would be going for hours. No one would even think to look for me until morning. And even then, they would assume I was sleeping in. They would text. They would be annoyed. They would not be worried. I walked the 3 miles to my bank's ATM. The white dress I wore was thin, a summer dress, and I probably looked like a victim from a horror movie, barefoot and walking along the empty manicured shoulder of a Scottsdale road. A few cars passed, all expensive, all slowing down and then speeding up, the drivers deciding I was not their problem. At the ATM, I pulled the card, the one I'd had since I was 16, linked to the savings account from my summer job at a bakery, an account my parents didn't monitor because they didn't know it existed. I pulled out the maximum, $600. It felt like a mountain of cash. It felt like nothing. I stuffed the bills deep into the pocket of my dress. My house was dark when I slipped back in through the side door to the laundry room, the one that always stuck. The music from the backyard was a dull, persistent throb through the walls, the bass vibrating in the soles of my feet, which were now raw and dirty. I didn't turn on the lights. I knew the way. In my room, I pulled out the worn canvas duffel bag I used for art class. I was methodical. I was quiet. I was a surgeon excising a tumor. My sketchbook, the thick one with the black cover, all my pencils, my laptop, the charger. The $600 went into a small zippered pocket inside. A change of clothes, black jeans, a gray sweatshirt, 2 pairs of socks, clean underwear. I paused at my closet. I thought about the nice things, the few expensive items they'd bought me over the years, usually as hand-me-downs from Ava. I left them. I took the oldest, most worn pair of running shoes I owned. I put them on, lacing them tight. The gravel had cooled in the hour I was gone, the desert heat finally bleeding out of the stones as I walked back to the front gate. I didn't look back. The bus station was a different world. It was downtown, under the highway overpass, a concrete box that smelled of diesel fumes, stale urine, and burnt coffee. It was lit by the cold, buzzing, blue-white of fluorescent tubes that made everyone look sick. The people here were not party guests. They were ghosts, like me, waiting in plastic chairs bolted to the floor. I stood in front of the departure board, a flickering CRT monitor that was probably older than I was. Phoenix to Los Angeles, Phoenix to El Paso, Phoenix to Flagstaff. My eyes scanned, looking for nothing in particular. I just knew I needed to go far. I needed to go where I could be cold. And then I saw it, not on the board, but outside, through the grime-streaked windows, a massive billboard across the street, for a bank or an insurance company. I don't remember, but the image was a glittering, knife-sharp skyline at dusk. It was all glass and steel and height, a city that scraped the clouds, and in the corner, in clean, simple font, Chicago. It felt less like a choice and more like an instruction, a signal. I walked up to the counter. The woman behind the glass was chewing gum, her face a mask of profound boredom. "One way," I said. My voice was hoarse. She snapped her gum. "Where to?" "Chicago?" She didn't even look up. "That's 3 transfers. 48 hours if you're lucky. Gonna be 205. I pushed $205 of my $600 through the slot. The bills were crumpled. She pulled them through, flattened them, and pushed a long, flimsy ticket back at me. "Leaves 11:30, gate 4. "Thank you," she just grunted, already looking past me to the next person. The bus arrived, a huge, rattling beast that hissed to a stop. The line moved slowly. The driver, a large man with a graying beard and kind, tired eyes, stood by the door, taking tickets. He took mine, tore it, and handed me the stub. He looked at me, really looked, for a solid 2 seconds. He saw the white dress under my sweatshirt, the dirt on my face, the rawness around my eyes. "Long night, kid?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. I nodded, the lump in my throat so thick I thought I would choke. "Long enough to start," I managed. He nodded once, a gesture of understanding that was heavier than any sympathy. "Well, get on. Find a seat. Try and get some sleep." I did. I found a seat by a window that was so scratched it looked like a spider's web. The bus smelled like recirculated air and old vinyl. I didn't sleep, not for the first day. I watched Arizona bleed into New Mexico, then Texas. I watched the sun-baked, familiar desert, the landscape of my entire life, give way to the endless, flat plains of the heartland. The saguaros I tried to light up for a party I didn't have were replaced by nodding oil derricks, then by endless fields of corn, brown and skeletal in the late spring. On the second day, somewhere in Missouri, I took out my sketchbook. The bus was cold. The air conditioning was an Arctic blast. I opened to a clean page. I started to draw. I drew a room. It was all wrong for a girl who grew up with stucco and terracotta. It was a room with hardwood floors, old and scarred, a wall of exposed brick, and one entire wall that was just a window, a massive, floor-to-ceiling grid of steel-framed glass. It was tall. The light coming through it was not the warm, golden hour light of Arizona. It was a cold, clear, almost blue light. In the center of the room, I drew a single, simple, empty chair. I turned on my phone for the first time. 27 texts. My mother, my father, Ava, Rosie. Where are you? This isn't funny. Your mother is a wreck. You need to call. Now. Rosemary. You completely ruined Ava's night. Are you happy? Just answer. Are you okay? Richard will be calling the police if you don't answer in 1 hour. I opened the Notes app. I typed one sentence for myself. A new rule. The only rule. Don't beg to be seen. I turned the phone off. I didn't know if they called the police. I didn't care. I arrived in Chicago at 5:17 in the morning. The bus station spat me out onto a street that looked nothing like the billboard. The city smelled like old smoke, damp pavement, and bizarrely, hot waffles from a diner down the street. The air was cold. It was the end of May, and it was cold. A sharp wind came off the lake. A solid wall of air that hit me so hard it made me gasp. It tore the heat from my skin. It felt like a baptism. I tasted soot on my tongue. I had less than $400 left. I spent 3 days in a hostel, sleeping with my bag as a pillow. Before I found a room, it was in Pilsen, in an old, beautiful, crumbling building. I shared a room with 3 other girls. My space was a top bunk. The rent was $300 a month. First and last up front. I paid it, leaving me with almost nothing. The walls were cracked. The paint, a sickly yellow, was peeling off in long strips, revealing the plaster beneath. The single bathroom we all shared had a shower that produced either scalding hot or freezing cold water. Nothing in between. I loved it. I got 2 jobs in 2 days. The first was the morning shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., at a cafe in the Loop called the Copper Finch. It was all gleaming espresso machines and impatient people in suits. I learned to steam milk, to pull shots, and to smile when people treated me like I was part of the furniture. The second job was from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., in the stockroom of a high-end secondhand furniture store in Lincoln Park called Room and Remnant. It wasn't retail. I wasn't allowed up front. I was in the back, in a dusty, cavernous warehouse, helping unload trucks, cataloging chipped credenzas and stained velvet sofas, and scrubbing grime off pieces before they could be artfully distressed and sold for thousands. My days were brutal. I was up at 4:30 a.m. I walked 40 minutes to the cafe. I was on my feet for 8 hours, my smile aching. I walked to the train, took it to the warehouse, and lifted heavy furniture for 5 hours, my muscles screaming. I got home after 11, ate a bowl of instant ramen, took a scalding then freezing shower, and fell into my bunk. But the nights, from 11 p.m. until I couldn't keep my eyes open, those 2 hours were mine. I sat on my bunk, my laptop balanced on my knees, my headphones plugged in. I devoured free online courses, articles, and pirated textbooks, color theory, the principles of light and shadow, architectural composition, the history of Bauhaus, the ergonomics of a well-designed chair. I was exhausted. I was starving. I was invisible in a whole new city. But I was learning. One afternoon at the Copper Finch, during the 1 p.m. rush, it was chaos. The line was out the door. I was on the register and the espresso machine at the same time. My movements a frantic, sweaty blur. A man in a suit, his phone pressed to his ear, slapped his credit card on the counter. "Double espresso. To go. Now." I nodded, ringing him up. "Right away, sir." I turned to the machine. I pulled the shot. My hands moving fast. I put the tiny cup and a lid on the counter. He didn't look up from his phone. He barked into it. "No. You tell him the margins are non-negotiable." He hadn't taken the cup. "Sir? Your espresso?" He finished his call, snapped his phone shut, and looked at me. His eyes were blank. He didn't see me. He saw an obstacle. He wanted his caffeine. He snapped his fingers. A sharp, loud snap, right in my face. "Espresso," he said again, as if to a dog. I froze. The entire cafe seemed to stop. The hiss of the steam wand, the chatter, all of it just paused. I felt the blood rush to my face, hot and humiliating. It was the same feeling as standing by the cake. It was the feeling of being pushed off the step. I put my hands on the counter. I looked at his. I looked at his expensive watch. I looked at his clean, manicured fingers. I swallowed. I swallowed the shame, the rage, the acidic, bitter taste of it. And as I swallowed, I felt it change. It didn't curdle into sadness. It hardened. It turned into fuel. I picked up the cup. I pushed it into his hand. My smile was brittle, but it was there. "Have a great day, sir," he grunted, turned, and left. As I watched him go, I made a new vow. It wasn't, "Don't beg to be seen." It was more aggressive, learn faster than their contempt. I worked, I saved, I drew on napkins during my 10-minute breaks at the cafe. I drew on the back of inventory sheets in the warehouse. I was sketching a broken armchair at Room and Remnant, trying to figure out how I would redesign it. Not just fix it, how I would give it a new life. A few weeks later, at the Copper Finch, a woman was sitting at the small counter by the window. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with a sharp silver bob and intense, intelligent eyes. She had been there for an hour, nursing a single black coffee. I was wiping down the counter at the end of my shift, gathering my things, my napkin sketch from my break, a quick study of how the morning light hit the fire escape across the street, was sitting on the counter. I reached for it, meaning to throw it away. Her hand, slender and covered in interesting silver rings, shot out and flattened the napkin. "Don't," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it commanded the space. I stopped. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the sketch. Her eyes traced the lines, the quick, desperate attempt I'd made to capture the shadows. She looked at it for a long, silent minute. It was the longest anyone had looked at my work. It was the longest anyone had looked at me. She finally lifted her gaze from the napkin and met my eyes. "Who taught you to see light like this?" she asked. My heart was hammering so hard, I was sure she could hear it. "No one, ma'am," I whispered. "I'm just teaching myself." She smiled. A small, sharp, knowing smile. And for the first time since I left Arizona, I felt something other than invisible. I felt seen. The woman's hand on the napkin was an anchor. It was slender, elegant, and marked by time, with an assortment of heavy, sculptural silver rings that looked like tiny pieces of architecture. She hadn't asked. She had just acted. "You draw the shadow," she said, her voice a low, gravelly thing, like whiskey poured over rocks. She was still looking at the napkin, not at me. "You don't draw the fire escape. You draw the shape the fire escape leaves on the brick. Most people don't see that. They draw the thing, not the effect of the thing." I could only nod, my throat thick with espresso steam and adrenaline. I like the light," I whispered, the words sounding stupid and small. She finally looked up. Her eyes were the color of the Chicago sky in winter, a sharp, pale gray, and they were utterly devoid of pity. They were assessing. "You have the outline of someone who has been invisible," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, as clinical as a diagnosis. "You've spent a lot of time watching how the world hits things instead of just watching the things themselves. It's an advantage. If you know how to use it, a liability. If you don't..." She slid the napkin back toward me, her rings making a soft, scraping sound on the Formica counter. "My name is Marjorie Vale." She pulled a business card from a sleek leather case. It was heavy, the cardstock thick as cardboard, the color of rich cream. The font was simple, black, and perfect. North and Nest, Marjorie Vale. Founder. There was an address in the West Loop and a phone number. "I have an internship opening at my studio," she said, pushing the card to rest next to the napkin sketch. "It doesn't pay much. Minimum wage, maybe $1 or $2 over. To start. You will run for coffee. You will label samples. You will do exhausting, terrible, boring work. But it's worth the learning, if you're interested in more than just shadows." She stood up, leaving a $5 bill on the counter for her $3 coffee. She didn't wait for my answer. She simply turned, her silver gray bob immaculate, and walked out of the Copper Finch, the bell on the door jangling in her wake. I stood there for a full minute, my heart trying to beat its way out of my ribs. My shift was over. I was supposed to be on the train to Rumen Remnant, to the warehouse of stained sofas and broken dreams. I stared at the card, North and Nest. I didn't call for 3 days. The card lived in the pocket of my jeans, its sharp corners digging into my thigh, a constant, terrifying reminder. I went to the cafe. I went to the warehouse. I went back to my bunk bed in Pilsen and stared at the cracked ceiling. Not good enough. The words were a rhythm in my head, the anthem of my childhood. You're not good enough for a party. You're not good enough for a real job. You're not good enough to take up space. The cafe was safe. The warehouse was safe. They were predictable misery. This card, this woman, this opportunity. It felt like a trap. It was a place I could be seen, which meant it was a place I could be judged. On the third night, at 2 a.m, I was sitting on the floor of the shared bathroom, the single fluorescent light buzzing. I was thinking about the man who snapped his fingers in my face. I was thinking about my sister's name on my cake. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking. I dialed the number. It rang once. Vol. Marjorie's voice answered, sharp and awake. This is Rosemary Castillo, I stammered. From the coffee shop, the Copper Finch. A beat of silence. You took your time, she said. She didn't sound annoyed. She sounded amused. Be at the studio tomorrow, 8 a.m. Don't be late. She hung up. I quit the warehouse job the next morning via text message. The studio was in the West Loop, in a massive, century-old brick building that had once been a tannery. The air in the neighborhood smelled of the train tracks and roasting coffee. I walked into the lobby, took a rattling freight elevator to the 5th floor, and stepped out into a space that took my breath away. It was one room, probably 10,000 square feet, with the original, scarred hardwood floors from 1905, one entire wall. The north-facing one was the grid of steel-framed windows I had drawn on the bus, soaring 30 feet to the exposed timber ceiling. The light wasn't the harsh, blinding white of Arizona. It was a soft, diffuse, painterly light. The air smelled of sawdust, fresh-cut pine, coffee, and something metallic. The studio was a glorious, organized chaos. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling library of material samples. White oak in a dozen different stains, brass fittings, slabs of marble, coiled rolls of wallpaper. Another wall was just mood boards, acres of them, pinned with fabric swatches, tear sheets from obscure European magazines, scraps of poetry, and paint chips. It was the inside of a brilliant mind, made physical. Marjorie was standing at a massive oak table in the center, drawing. She didn't look up. You're 2 minutes early. I like that, she said. There's the kitchen, make coffee. Then, your first job. My first job was labeling paint samples. Not just labeling. I had to create a database, cataloging thousands of chips by brand, finish, VOC level, and light reflectance value. It was mind-numbing. It took me 2 full days. My second job was organizing the fabric library. My third was running across town in the rain to pick up a specific grout sample. I still worked the morning shift at the Copper Finch, from 6 until 2. Then I'd take the train to the studio and work for Marjorie from 3 until she kicked me out, which was usually after 8 or 9 at night. I went home, slept for 5 hours, and did it all again. After a week of this, I was balancing on a ladder, trying to recatalog a box of antique hardware, when Marjorie called me over. Are you any good on a computer, or do you just draw on napkins? I'm a fast learner, I said. Good. She pointed to a high-end workstation in the corner. I need renderings for the Pritzker condo. The client wants to see options for the living room. The software is on. Tutorials are in the server folder. I need 3 distinct concepts by Friday. It was Wednesday. Do you know AutoCAD? SketchUp? V-Ray? She asked. No, I said. You have 48 hours, she said, turning back to her own table. I did not go home. I stayed at the studio. I lived on the coffee I had once served. I tore through the tutorials, my brain on fire, absorbing the complex, three-dimensional modeling software as if my life depended on it. It felt like it did. I wasn't just learning a program. I was learning the language of how to build the rooms I saw in my head. By Friday morning, I had 3 renderings. They were technically perfect. One was minimalist. One was a maximalist take with bold colors. One was a safe, neutral, transitional design. I presented them, my hands shaking, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. Marjorie stared at them. She sighed back, steepled her fingers, and just looked. The silence stretched out, loud and heavy. "They're fine," she said finally. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Fine? They are competent. You learned the software. You met the deadline. You filled the space. This," she said, tapping the safe one, "is what the client will probably pick. It's also what an algorithm could have designed. It's beige. It's safe." She turned in her chair to face me. "Rosemary, you are still being invisible. You are so terrified of doing the wrong thing that you have done nothing. You're still just labeling. This is a technical skill. I don't need a technician. I need a designer. I need a point of view." Her voice softened. Just a fraction. "You showed me that napkin. You showed me you can see. Now you're hiding. Stop hiding. I told you I needed renderings. I meant I needed ideas. You gave me none. You just gave me furniture." She stood up. "Go again, and this time, make me feel something. I don't care if it's anger, or confusion, or joy. Just don't be safe." I was devastated. I wanted to run. I wanted to go back to the cafe, where the worst thing that could happen was a rude customer, but instead, I sat down at the workstation. I deleted the files. Make me feel something. I stopped thinking about what the client wanted. I started thinking about the space. A condo on the 42nd floor, all glass, facing the lake. What did it feel like to live in the sky? What did home mean when you were that disconnected from the earth? I stopped looking at the approved vendor list. I started digging. I started scavenging. I took a walk. I found a construction site a few blocks away. A gut job on an old brownstone. There was a pile of debris. I saw the edge of an old window frame. The original wood, scarred with 100 years of paint. I saw a pile of Chicago common bricks, worn smooth, with a pinkish, imperfect hue. I hauled them back to the studio. They were heavy. I was covered in soot. Marjorie watched me, a small smile playing on her lips, but she said nothing. I stayed at the studio all night. I didn't use the computer. I built a maquette, a small, physical model, on a piece of plywood. I built it in the dead center of the studio, under a single, focused spotlight, so I could watch the shadows. I built a new design. I used the brick. I used the old wood. I tried to imagine the light as a physical material, a language. I tried to think of the textures as memories. I must have fallen asleep, my head on the table, my hand still holding a tiny mocked-up chair. I woke up at what must have been 3 or 4 in the morning. The studio was dark, save for the emergency exit signs. The city lights glowed through the massive windows. I was freezing, and then I realized I was null. A blanket was draped over my shoulders. It was impossibly soft. A thick gray cashmere throw I recognized from the sample library, one that probably cost more than my rent for 6 months. I pulled it tighter. In the pre-dawn light, I looked at my model. It was messy. It was imperfect, but it was real. It had a heartbeat. I could hear it breathe. When Marjorie came in at 7, I was asleep on the studio sofa, wrapped in the cashmere. She didn't wake me. She just made coffee. The smell of it finally roused me. She walked over, cup in hand, and looked at the model I had built. She circled it, twice. She pointed to the salvaged brick. "Structural?" "No," I whispered, my voice rough. "A shelf, for a single object. The first thing you see when you walk in. The light from the east window will hit it at 8 a.m. She pointed to the scrap of wood I'd used. And that? As the frame for a mirror. So the first thing you see isn't just the hallway, it's yourself, reflected in something old. Marjorie nodded. A single, slow, deliberate movement. "You're listening," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't use the software." "The software is a tool," she cut me off. "Like a pencil. You're the one who has to have the idea. This is an idea. It's not safe. The client will probably hate the brick, but they'll feel something." She took a sip of her coffee. "We have a new client, a small one, a woman in Lincoln Park with a Victorian that has a horrible, dead-end hallway. She wants a reading nook. The budget is nothing. It's a throwaway job. All corners and no light. It's yours, from start to finish, if you want it." My heart stopped. "Yes," I said. "I want it." "Good. Now, go home. Take a shower. You smell like a construction site. Be back by noon." I poured everything into that nook. I met the client. I didn't just ask what books she read. I asked how she read. Did she curl up? Did she need a light? Did she drink tea? I designed a space not to be looked at, but to be used. I used salvaged wood. I designed a hidden light source. I found a weaver on the other side of the city to make a custom cushion from imperfect, hand-dyed wool. I presented my final concept board to Marjorie and the client. When I finished, I looked at the cover sheet for the small binder I had prepared. The line for the designer was blank. Marjorie slid a pen across the table, a heavy, expensive-feeling pen. "If you do the work," she said, locking eyes with me, "you take the credit. That's the other half of the job. Sign your name. Rosemary." My hand was shaking, but I took the pen, and for the first time in my life, I wrote my name on something that mattered. Concept. R. Castillo. That small reading nook was more than a job. It was a manifesto. It was the moment I stopped learning Marjorie's language and started speaking my own. I began to develop a philosophy, a name for what I did. I called it soul build. It was the only term that felt right. My childhood had been spent in a pristine, soulless house where everything was new, perfect, and lacking a story, a house built for photographs, not for people. Now, I found myself drawn to the opposite. I was drawn to the broken, the discarded, the overlooked. I wasn't just recycling, I was reincarnating. I was taking objects that had been told they were worthless and giving them a new voice. I became a scavenger. My days off, which were rare, were spent at salvage yards, construction site dumpsters, and flea markets in the suburbs. I wasn't looking for antiques. I was looking for potential. I was looking for a chronicle. I found a stack of warped, century-old tin ceiling tiles, rusted and green with verdigris. I didn't scrub them clean. I sealed the rust in, capturing that history, and used them as a backsplash in a tiny, dark kitchen, where they caught the light with a soft, watery shimmer. I found a pile of old steel rebar, twisted and useless. I had it cut, cleaned, and welded into the legs for a dining table. The rough texture a shocking, beautiful contrast to a smooth, polished maple top. A client in a tiny studio apartment in Lakeview lamented her lack of a view. Her one window faced a brick wall. The next week, I found a set of shattered mirrors from a demolished ballroom. I didn't throw them out. I spent 40 hours meticulously arranging the broken pieces, the way one would a mosaic, into a massive, wall-sized art piece. I didn't re-silver them. I let the cracks in the faded, ghostly backing show. When we hung it, it didn't just reflect the room. It fractured and multiplied the light, sending it into every dark corner. It became the view. It turned the brick wall into 1,000 abstract, glittering shapes. That was the core of Soul Build, finding the story and giving it light. The client from the reading nook was the first. She was ecstatic. She wrote a small post about it on a local, niche design blog, a blog read by perhaps 500 people. But they were the right 500. She posted a photo I'd taken, not a bright, overlit shot, but a picture of the nook in the early morning, the light just grazing the text of an open book. The trickle started. I was still at North and Nest, but Marjorie let me take on these tiny projects in my own time. She called them your extracurriculars. I got an email from a woman who had a 60-square-foot bedroom. "Can you make it breathe?" she wrote. I did. I built her a bed frame that seemed to float, using hidden supports and a line of soft LED light. I used a high-gloss, pale blue paint on the ceiling to reflect the sky. I made her cramped, tiny apartment feel like it could expand. These clients didn't have money, not real money. They had $1,000, maybe two, saved up. They weren't looking for luxury. They were looking for relief. They were people in small, dark, awkward city spaces who just wanted to come home and feel a sense of peace. I was giving them what I had been so desperate for in my bunk bed in Pilsen, a space that felt like my own. I was still working at the Copper Finch. I had to. The internship at North and Nest paid, but barely, and my side projects were mostly paying for their own materials. I was saving every extra dime. The 8-hour shift of serving coffee had become automatic, a physical meditation, but I wasn't invisible there anymore. I was biding my time. One afternoon, my boss, the owner, a gruff but decent man named Sam, found me sketching on a napkin during my lunch break. He was staring at the front of the cafe. It was a mess of competing signs, peeling paint, and a bad, generic coffee shop awning. "Rosemary," he said, You're in school for this stuff, right?" "I'm an intern," I corrected. "At a design studio?" Yeah. Listen," he gestured to the front. "This looks terrible. I know it, but I don't have, 20 grand to throw at it. But sales are flat. This neighborhood is full of fancy new places. I'm getting killed." He looked at me, embarrassed. "Do you think you could do something for cheap?" I looked at the facade. It was a problem of light, not just paint. The awning blocked the sun. The windows were covered in vinyl ads. The entryway was cluttered. "I can," I said, a new, firm voice coming out of me. "But not for cheap. Sam, for a fair price? And I have an idea." "No marble," he grumbled. "No," I said. "No marble, reclaimed wood, something with a story." He gave me $800 and his blessing. I took a weekend, and I called in every favor. I found a demolished barn in Wisconsin and got a truckload of weathered, gray-silver barn wood for $50. I tore down the ugly awning myself. I stripped the vinyl off the windows, letting the light flood in. I clad the entire facade in the reclaimed wood, running the boards vertically to give the squat building a sense of height. I didn't sand them. I let the old nail holes, the saw marks, the silver-gray patina of 50 Winters show. I designed one simple, elegant sign, a single piece of steel, rusted to a deep orange, with Copper Finch laser cut out of it, backlit by a simple, warm white light. The total cost of materials was just under $500. I gave Sam an invoice for the remaining $300 for my labor. It was the first time I'd invoiced an old boss. He looked at it, looked at the cafe, and then wrote me a check for $600. "It's an investment," he said, gruff as ever. A month later, he told me his morning rush was up 30%. People were stopping. They were looking. They were coming in. I had changed the story of the building. The $600 was seed money. With the rest of my savings, I finally moved out of the bunk bed in Pilsen, and I rented a space. It wasn't an apartment. It was a corner of a shared, unheated warehouse in Humboldt Park. It was 400 square feet of concrete floor, one outlet, and a leaking roof. I loved it. I built a massive workbench out of salvaged 2x4s. This was my workshop. This was my studio. The small jobs started to take up more time. Too much time. I was still working at the cafe, still interning for Marjorie, and now, trying to build furniture and installations in my freezing workshop at night, I was burning out. "You need help," Marjorie told me, finding me asleep at my desk at North and Nest. My face stuck to a V-Ray rendering. "I can't afford help," I mumbled. "You can't afford not to have help. You're going to make a stupid mistake. You're going to cut off a finger. You're going to specify the wrong paint for a $50,000 job. Find an art student, pay them a little, teach them a lot. That's the model. So I did. I put up a help wanted sign at the local art college. It was written in pencil on a piece of index card. I hired Nico. Nico was a sculpture student, sharp, cynical, with neon green hair and hands that were perpetually covered in clay or grease. They were brilliant. Nico didn't just see potential in junk. They saw the abstract, kinetic energy in it. They became my fabrication team, my reality check, and my first real friend in the city. Together, we wrestled my scavenged finds into form. I was also learning the other side of it, the hard side, the business. "What's your quote?" a client asked. A man in a new construction condo who wanted a soulful built-in shelving unit. I fumbled. "Well, the materials, and maybe $500 for labor?" He smiled, a tight, thin smile. "Great. Send me the drawing, and I'll have my contractor build it." I went back to Marjorie, furious. "He stole my idea." "No, dear," she said, not looking up from a lighting plan. "You gave it to him for free. You didn't give him a quote. You gave him a number. A quote comes with a contract. It comes with a non-refundable design fee. It has a clause for copyright and intellectual property. It specifies payment terms and a warranty. You're not a girl with a hobby anymore. Rosemary, you're a business. Now, go write a contract." I spent a week learning basic contract law. I learned about liability, insurance, and net 30 payment terms. The next client who asked for a quote got a 10-page, professionally bound document. They didn't blink. They just signed it. I had stopped lowballing myself. I had stopped acting like I was lucky to be there. I had started to charge what my time and my vision were worth. I kept my social media footprint small, almost non-existent. I had an Instagram account, but it wasn't full of glossy, finished, perfect rooms. It was pictures of my hands, covered in paint. It was a video of Nico welding rebar, sparks flying in the dark. It was a close-up of the rust on a tin tile, captioned, "This is the color of 50 years of rain. Why would you ever paint over that?" I wasn't selling an aesthetic. I was selling a process. I was telling a story. The small jobs continued for almost a year. The copper finch, the tiny apartments, the fractured mirror. I was working harder than I ever had in my life. I was exhausted. But it was a clean, good, heavy exhaustion. One night, I came back to my little workshop after a grueling 14-hour day. Taped to my workbench was a letter. It was from the client with the tiny bedroom, the one who wanted to breathe. It wasn't an email. It was a handwritten card, on thick, creamy paper. It was just 3 sentences. "Rosemary, I have lived in this apartment for 10 years. For 10 years. The sound of the traffic outside, the neighbors, the radiator. It was all just noise. I don't know what you did, but I sat in my room last night, and for the first time, I felt nothing but quiet. Thank you. You didn't just change my room. You turned the noise in my house into silence." I sat on a metal stool, under the single, bare bulb of my workshop, and I read it 10 times. I held the paper, this physical proof, in my hands. The next day, I brought the card to the studio to show Marjorie. I was beaming. I felt like I had finally done it. She read it. Her face was soft. "It's beautiful." "Rosemary," she said, handing it back to me. She looked at me, really looked at me, a long, assessing gaze, just like she had in the coffee shop all that time ago. A small, proud smile touched the corner of her lips. "Well," she said, turning back to her desk, "you're not invisible anymore." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't realized I was still waiting for them. 2 weeks later, the email came. It was from a mid-level, very respected national design magazine, the kind that didn't just show rich houses, but that talked about ideas. The subject line was, "Feature Inquiry." The email was short. A senior editor had seen the niche blog post about the reading nook, had followed the breadcrumbs to my tiny Instagram, and had been, in her words, utterly captivated. She wasn't just offering a small feature, She wanted a full profile. "We're running a story on the next wave of sustainable design," she wrote, "and we think you're it. We'd like to pitch a feature on your work. Our working title is The Storyteller of Light." The magazine piece, The Storyteller of Light, came out in the October issue. It wasn't the cover, but it was a 6-page spread. The editor had done a masterful job. The photos were moody, intimate, and focused on the process. My hands covered in rust, a close-up of a welded joint, the fractured mirror reflecting a sliver of light. The text wasn't about me. It was about the philosophy. It was about soul build. I bought a copy at a newsstand and read it standing on a street corner, my coffee getting cold. I felt a strange, profound sense of dislocation, seeing my words and my work printed on glossy paper. The Monday after the magazine hit, my phone, a cheap prepaid model I'd had for 2 years, started to ring, and it didn't stop. It wasn't clients for tiny apartments. It was architects. It was other designers. And then, it was the Lark Line. The Lark Line was a new boutique hotel being developed in an old, forgotten brick building in Fulton Market. It was the talk of the town, a high-risk, high-design project. The email came from one of the partners. He had read the article. He wrote, "We are tired of our architects' sterile lobby proposals. What you do, that whispering thing, that's what we want. Can you meet us?" I walked into the meeting at North and Nest, with Marjorie at my side as a consultant. She had insisted, "You're walking into the lion's den. Rosemary, they'll try to eat you. Bring a lion tamer." The room was full of men in expensive suits. They looked at me, this 20-year-old in a second-hand blazer, and I could see the doubt. They showed me the plans, a big, cold, glass and steel box. "It's awful," I said. I hadn't meant to say it out loud. The room went silent. The lead architect, a man with a brutalist haircut, turned a deep shade of crimson. One of the partners, the one who emailed me, just laughed. "Good," he said. "That's why you're here. What would you do?" I hadn't prepared a pitch. I just spoke. "It's a hotel. People are tired. They're lonely. They want to feel held. This," I gestured to the rendering, "is an interrogation room. You need to tell a different story. This building was a tannery, right? It smelled of leather and sweat and work. It has a history. Don't erase it. Use it." I talked about a ceiling of reclaimed, unfinished timber from a local rail yard. I talked about a massive, central fireplace made of salvaged common brick. I talked about a check-in desk that wasn't a desk, but a massive, 12-foot-long slab of a fallen oak tree, and lighting, not spotlights. I described a custom-made chandelier, a cascade of hundreds of recycled glass bottles, lit from within by tiny, warm pinpricks, like fireflies. When I finished, I was out of breath. The architect looked like he wanted to murder me. The partner, however, was beaming. "When can you start?" I'll need to send you my contract," I said, my voice shaking. Marjorie kicked me under the table, hard. "She will," Marjorie said, her voice smooth as steel, "and her design fee is non-negotiable." That project almost killed me. It was my first time on a real construction site, a place where I was the one giving orders, not just scavenging scraps. I learned a new language, the language of hard hats and steel-toed boots, of general contractors, subcontractors, and union rules. The first day, I walked on site in my nice boots. The foreman, a huge man named Sal, took one look at me. "You the decorator?" he spat, the word an insult. "I'm the designer," I said. "Yeah, well, designer. You're in the way. This is a job site. Sweetheart, go pick out some pillows." The entire crew laughed. I was furious. I went home, cried for 10 minutes, and then I went back to my workshop. I spent all night building a full-scale physical model of the recycled bottle chandelier, teaching myself to solder the delicate connections, working out the weight load calculations. I was back on site at 5 a.m. the next morning, before Sal, before the crew. I was wearing my old, paint-spattered, steel-toed boots from the Room and Remnant warehouse. I had the model, heavy as hell, in my arms. When Sal arrived, I was sitting on a pile of drywall, drinking a coffee from a thermos. "This," I said, pointing to the model, "is the chandelier. The load is 312 pounds, distributed across 4 ceiling joists. Here are the electrical specs. Here's the fabrication plan. I'll be building the sub-assemblies in my workshop. Your electricians just need to run the conduit." Sal stared at the model. He stared at me. He walked over, picked it up, tested the weight. He looked at my soldering. "Huh," he grunted. It was the highest compliment I'd ever received. He never called me sweetheart again. The Larkline lobby opened 6 months later. It was a triumph. It was exactly as I had pictured it. It was warm. It was real. It was full of stories. You walked in, and you felt the building breathe a sigh of relief. The local paper ran a huge, full-page story, not in the design section, but in the main city section. The headline was, "The Space That Whispers." The day that article ran, I quit my job at the Copper Finch. I walked in, gave Sam a hug, and told him I couldn't make any more lattes. He told me he was proud of me. I left my apron on the hook. I also, formally, left North and Nest. It was terrifying. "It's time," Marjorie told me, as we stood in the finished Larkline lobby during the press party. "You can't fly when you're perched in someone else's nest, not even mine." It wasn't a firing. It was a graduation. The next contract landed a week later. It was from an indie record label, a group of young, impossibly cool producers. They had a new office, a raw concrete bunker. "We read the whispers thing," the lead producer said. "That's cool, but we don't want whispers. We make noise. We need a space that feels like visible sound. Can you do that?" I built them a conference room where the walls weren't flat, but a series of angled, fabric-wrapped panels that looked like a giant, frozen sound wave, which also, not coincidentally, perfectly dampened the acoustics. I hung lights that were just bare, linear neon tubes, running along the floor and up the walls, like the energy from a guitar amp. They loved it. The money was finally stable. It was good. The invoices I was sending out were no longer for $300. They were for $30,000. I had a lawyer. I had an accountant. I had a real, grown-up life that I had built from scratch. I took a massive leap. I signed a lease on a studio, not a corner in a leaking warehouse, but a clean, bright, beautiful 3,000-square-foot loft space in River North, with massive windows facing the city. I moved my workbench and Nico's welding gear, and we stood in the middle of the empty, echoing space. "What do we call this place?" Nico asked, spinning in a circle. "Castillo Atelier," I said. The name had been in my head for months. I painted it on the glass door myself, in simple, gold leaf letters. The first thing I did, after paying the deposit and my lawyer, was to sit down with my new accountant. "I want to set up a fund," I said. "A retirement fund? A 401k? "No," I said. "I want to take 10%. 10% of every single check, off the top. I want it to go into a separate account. I want to call it the Room for One Scholarship." I explained my idea. It was for kids like me, not necessarily kids from bad homes, but kids who were invisible, the ones who needed a chance, a mentor, a foot in the door. It would fund one, maybe 2. Paid internships at my new atelier. Internships for people who didn't have the connections, who couldn't afford to work for free. "That's very generous, Rosemary," my accountant said. "No," I said, thinking of Marjorie's cashmere blanket and Sal's grunting approval. "It's just the cost of doing business." Life was fast. It was all work and momentum and building. I was in the press. I was on lists. I was one to watch. I was so focused on building my new world that I had almost forgotten the old one. Until the old one found me. I got a text from Nico. It was a link, with no comment. Just a single. All caps. WTF? I clicked it. It was a link to a beauty blog. A popular one. The post was titled, "My Top 5 Tips for a Champagne Blush Glowing Look," and there, as the lead image for the post, was my photo, of the Lincoln Park reading nook. the light, the cushion I had custom made, the salvaged wood. It was my work, and under it, the byline, by Ava Castillo. She hadn't just used the photo, she had put her name on it. She was using it to promote her makeup blog, talking about how the color story of the Nook inspired her new favorite highlighter. She was using my work. My blood went cold. It was the same, familiar, chilling feeling. The spotlight was on, and she had, once again, stepped right into it. I didn't panic. I didn't rage. I was a business owner. I opened my laptop. I composed a very polite, very formal email. It was not to Ava, it was to the blog's editorial team, with a carbon copy to their legal department, whose email I found in 2 minutes. To whom it may concern, my name is Rosemary Castillo, of Castillo Atelier. It has come to my attention that you are using my copyrighted photography. I cited the original magazine publication. I cited my own professional portfolio. I attached the metadata from the original image file. I require the image to be taken down immediately and a retraction and apology to be posted, crediting my firm, Castillo Atelier, for the original work. I finished it with a polite, "I'm sure this was just an unfortunate oversight," and I CC'd my lawyer. The photo was down in 15 minutes. The blog posted a groveling, terrified apology, tagging my tiny Instagram account, which subsequently gained 5,000 followers in an hour. Then, my phone lit up. An email from Ava. "You could have just asked me. Rosie, you didn't have to be such a bitch and call my boss. You always ruin everything." I stared at the word Rosie. No one had called me that in 2 years. I was Rosemary. I typed one sentence back. "Do not use my work, ever." I blocked her email address. 2 minutes later, the text came. "My father, your mother is very upset. Ava is crying. You need to call her. Don't be so dramatic. It's just a picture. Don't embarrass this family. Rosemary." I read the text. Don't embarrass this family. The same words, the same script. I thought about my studio in River North. I thought about the Larkline lobby. I thought about the Room for One fund. I thought about the life I had built, board by board. While they were busy playing the same, tired game, I didn't reply. I just deleted the message. I blocked his number, too, and my mother's. I was done being their ghost. I was done being their background. I was done being confused. The next day, a different kind of email landed in my inbox. It was formal, impressive, and from the largest design conference in the Midwest. "Dear Ms. Castillo, the Board of Design Midwest would like to formally invite you to be a keynote speaker at our annual conference this spring. We have been following your career with great interest. We believe your soul-build philosophy is revolutionary. We would be honored if you would speak on your proposed topic, the story of rebirth." I sat at my new, expensive desk in my beautiful, light-filled studio, and I cried. Not from sadness, not from anger. It was relief. It was the feeling of a spine finally, fully straightening. I was in the middle of drafting my reply when my assistant, whom I paid a real salary, buzzed my intercom. "Rosemary? There's a call for you. A Mr. Harrison from Granite Harbor Partners. He says he's a real estate developer. He says he read the article about the Larkline, and he has a penthouse he wants to talk to you about." I picked up the phone. "This is Rosemary Castillo," and I listened. The call from Mr. Harrison at Granite Harbor Partners was not warm. It was efficient. It was a scalpel. "Ms. Castillo," he said, his voice clipped and dry. He did not waste time on pleasantries. "We saw your metrics on the Larkline. You didn't just design a lobby. You increased their ADR and perceived brand value by, our analysts estimate, 30%. You made an old building more valuable than a new one. That, Ms. Castillo, is what we are interested in." He invited me to a meeting. I brought my lawyer, Ms. Byrne, a woman who had come recommended by Marjorie and who looked like she ate bad contracts for breakfast. The Granite Harbor office was on the 50th floor of a different building, a shrine of glass and steel. Harrison laid it out. "We have the Valiant Tower. It will be the most exclusive address in the Gold Coast. We have one asset we don't know how to move. The Penthouse. It's a raw shell, a concrete box. We need you to turn that box into a trophy. We want your soul-build story. We want your whisper. My fee, I started, for a project of this scale. We're not proposing a fee, Harrison interrupted, steepling his fingers. We are proposing a partnership. The deal was both an insult and the opportunity of a lifetime. They would cover all material and construction costs, of course, but my fee, my design, my name, my studio's labor, and most crucially, the public relations value I would bring was to be contributed as sweat equity. In exchange, Harrison said, we are offering a 10% stake in the Penthouse itself, upon completion and contingent on our pre-sale performance. My lawyer stiffened. Contingent how? The Penthouse is the hook. We need it to pre-sell 80% of the other luxury units in the tower before the grand opening. If you help us hit that KPI, 10% of the $10 million asset is yours. If we don't, you've designed a very nice, very expensive calling card for yourself, on our dime. It was a tightrope. Ms. Byrne was furious. It's a trap. Rosemary, she hissed at me in the glass elevator on the way down. You're taking all the risk. Sweat equity is a fancy term for free work. If they don't hit their magic number, you get nothing. You've paid them for the privilege of designing their showpiece. We were silent as we crossed the lobby. I'll do it, I said. Rosemary, I advise. I'll do it, I repeated. But we are redrafting that contract. I'm not just their hook. I'm their engine. I'm not betting on them. Ms. Byrne, I'm betting on myself. We went back to them. The negotiations were brutal. They were cold. They were strategic. I was no longer the girl sketching on a napkin. I was the founder of Castillo Atelier, and I had my own metrics. My brand is not just sweat, I told Harrison, my voice as level as his. It's an asset, and I'm leveraging it. You want me to take the risk? Fine, but so do you. Ms. Byrne, seeing my determination, went in for the kill. She drafted a new clause. It was beautiful. It was lethal. It's a simple acceleration clause, she presented to their team of lawyers. If Granite Harbor Partners terminates this agreement for any reason, or if they fail to meet their own capital obligations, or if they just decide to go in a different direction, Ms. Castillo's sweat equity, valued at her full commercial rate plus a 25% premium, converts instantly, and that value is applied first to the Penthouse title. If you pull the rug, she keeps the rug. Their lawyers called it absurd. Harrison, who saw his Larkline-inspired ROI metrics, saw it as a necessary risk. They signed. They assumed, I'm sure, that it was a legal formality that would never be triggered. I walked into the raw Penthouse shell a week later. It was a concrete box, 60 stories in the sky. Wind howled through the plastic-wrapped openings where windows would be. It was gray, dead, and utterly silent. It's perfect, I told Nico, who had come with me. I refused to bring in a single piece of imported Italian marble. I didn't want high-gloss lacquer. I brought my soul-build philosophy to the clouds. I had the walls hand-troweled in white Venetian plaster. Not paint. I wanted them to feel like skin, to catch the light and hold it. I found a source for massive, reclaimed timber beams from a century-old barn that had collapsed in a blizzard. We had them hoisted 60 stories by crane, these scars of a past life, and set them into the ceiling. I had them cut a massive, circular skylight in the center of the roof, and beneath it, I brought in my tree. It was an olive tree. I had bought it as a sapling 2 years ago, with the first check from the Copper Finch redesign. I'd been growing it in my Humboldt Park workshop, then in my studio, nursing it under grow lights, pruning it, talking to it. It was my oldest, most patient friend. We brought it up in the freight elevator, a living green heart for a concrete and glass chest, and planted it in the center of the main room. The marketing team from Granite Harbor descended, all slick suits and spray tans. They wanted to film me. to stage me. Rosemary, can you laugh, holding this blueprint? Can you look soulful by the window? I kicked them out. This is fake, I told them. You want my brand? You get my process. You film Nico. I gave Nico my phone. Film what's real, I said. The videos we posted to the Castillo Atelier Instagram were short, raw, and had no music, just the sound of wind, the scrape of the plasterer's trowel, a 10-second clip of my hands, bleeding after weaving a custom light fixture, a time-lapse of the ancient beam, agonizingly, being lifted into place. A video titled, "A Tree Learns to Fly," got 1 million views. The authenticity was the marketing. It was real. The virtual tour went live. It was just my space. The plaster, the wood, the tree. The KPI for pre-sales was 80%. They hit 95% in 3 weeks. The penthouse wasn't even finished, and it had already sold the entire building. Granite Harbor was ecstatic. And then, the noise started. Ava, of course, she had seen the articles, the buzz. She posted an Instagram story. It was a preening photo of herself, pouting in a new dress. The caption, "It's so funny. People only seem to shine when they're standing next to me. TBT family, first real influencer." The backlash was immediate, and not from me. Her own followers, and the design bloggers who now followed us both, flooded the comments. "Are you talking about your sister? The one whose work you stole? This is the most pathetic, jealous post I've ever seen. She's building skyscrapers, and you're pouting." She deleted it, but the screenshots were everywhere. Then, my mother, a text message, from a new number. I had blocked her old one. "Rosemary, this is enough. Your sister is distraught. All this showing off, is unbecoming. You are making a scene. The family needs you to calm down. People are talking. We are still your parents." I stared at the text. Don't make a scene. Calm down. The same words. The same script from a lifetime ago. I looked up. I was on the scaffolding in the penthouse, 60 stories up, covered in plaster dust, watching the sunset over Lake Michigan, the light turning my olive tree to gold. I deleted the message. I blocked the number. I did not reply. The keynote speech for Design Midwest was 2 weeks later. The auditorium was packed. 2,000 people, architects, students, press. I saw Mr. Harrison and the Granite Harbor team in the front row. They were there to watch their investment. I was introduced. The host read from a card. The press has been calling her the lamplighter of old spaces. I walked on stage. I was not the girl in the white dress. I was the woman in the black suit. I didn't talk about color theory. I talked about work. I talked about the snap of a man's fingers in a coffee shop. I talked about the weight of a salvaged brick. And then I looked past the front row, to the cheap seats in the back, packed with students. I spoke to them. "They will tell you," I said, my voice clear and steady, ringing through the hall, "that you need a seat at their table. They will tell you to wait your turn, to be grateful, to not make a scene. They will tell you to wait for an invitation." I paused. The room was utterly silent. Here is what I have learned. You do not need an invitation to build your own table. You just need the tools, the guts, and the will. So stop waiting. Go build your table. And when you're done, make sure you send the ladder back down for the next person. The applause was a physical thing, a wave of sound that hit me. It wasn't the polite clapping of a Scottsdale party. It was a roar. The quote was all over the internet before I even walked off the stage. Harrison was waiting for me in the wings. His face was not cold. It was not strategic. He looked awestruck. "Rosemary," he said, and it was the first time he'd used my first name. That was remarkable. He called me the next day. The board is very pleased. The final pre-sales just closed. We are at 112% of our goal." "I'm glad my work paid off," I said, my voice level. "It did," he said, "and in light of that, and in light of the Frankly, the unprecedented PR value you've brought, the board has reevaluated our agreement. My heart stopped. I gripped the phone. Here it was. The pullout. The legal fight. Ms. Burns' clause flashed in my mind. Reevaluated how? The original 10% stake. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't reflect the partnership. We're preparing new paperwork. I waited. My breath held. We are offering you a co-ownership title, Ms. Castillo. 49% of the Penthouse, as a co-founding partner on the property. It's a full step toward a full title transfer, which we'd like to discuss after the launch. 49% of a $10 million asset. It wasn't a trap. It was a throne. I'll have my lawyer review the paperwork, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. Thank you. Mr. Harrison, I look forward to reading it. I hung up. I was standing in my studio. I looked at the room for one interns, busy at their desks. I looked at the city skyline. I had not just built a table, I had built a tower. The 49%, the co-ownership, the numbers were so large they were abstract. Just zeros on a piece of paper that Miss Byrne, my lawyer, had reviewed, approved, and filed. The press from the Design Midwest speech had been a tidal wave, lifting the valiant tower from a simple luxury building to a cultural landmark before it even opened. I was the storyteller of light. I was the lamplighter. And then, as the noise of the applause began to fade, the old familiar static began to creep in. It arrived, as it always did, from an unexpected angle, a new email address, no subject line. Rosemary, I hope all of this attention is making you happy. Your sister's not doing well. The things people are saying online, all because of your speech in that magazine, are cruel. She is heartbroken. She is your sister. This has gone too far. A simple public apology from you, clarifying that your story was just an artistic exaggeration and that you two are fine, would mean the world to her. It would be the mature and compassionate thing to do. She needs you. My mother's words, the same old tools, guilt, compassion as a weapon, the demand that I shrink myself to make Ava feel big, the request that I, once again, lie to the audience and tell them the spotlight was a mistake. I deleted the email. 2 days later, the coordinated attack. Nico sent me the link. Their text just a string of angry emojis. It was a trashy bottom-feeder gossip blog. The headline, exclusive, Ava Castillo, sister of Chicago's lamplighter, speaks out. The interview was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive poison. I love my sister, Ava claimed, but she's always been dramatic. She has a poetic way of remembering things. She insinuated I had always been jealous of her, that I'd had a hard time fitting in. She said, some people need a tragic backstory to feel interesting. I've always preferred to just be interesting. I just wish she would, move on. It was just a birthday party, years ago. It was a spectacular miscalculation on her part. She had intended to cast herself as the graceful, forgiving victim of my dramatic lies. But the internet I had won over was not the internet she knew. The comments section was a bloodbath. Her dramatic sister is literally changing the Chicago skyline. What do? Post makeup tutorials? This is the most pathetic attempt to steal the spotlight I have ever seen. You stole her work, and now you're stealing her story? Wait, so you're admitting the story is true? That you had a party on her birthday? Yikes. Ava had tried to set a trap, and instead had stepped right into it. The applause from the conference was still ringing in my ears, but now, so was this ugly, public, familial brawl. I was in my studio, staring at the screen. When Marjorie stopped by, she rarely came to the atelier. She called it visiting the cub after it's left the den. She looked at my screen, read the headline, and sighed. She put a hand on my shoulder. Let me give you the most important piece of advice you will ever get. Rosemary, more important than anything about V-Ray or fabric weight. I looked up. Don't let the applause imprison you, she said. her voice low and fierce. Don't. The crowd loves you today because you're the new, shiny thing. Tomorrow. They will want a new story. They will want this. She tapped the screen. This catfight. Don't perform for them. Don't perform for her. Don't perform for me. Go back to the work. The work is the only thing that's real. She was right. I was being dragged, inch by inch, back into their circus. I was letting them set the stage. I closed the browser. I would not apologize. I would not clarify. I would not issue a statement responding to a gossip blog. I would do the work. I would make a final statement, in my own language. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Harrison. Harrison, it's Rosemary. Ms. Castillo, I saw the blog. Our PR team is drafting a no comment. No, I cut him off. No comment, no drama. We're going to change the narrative, the grand opening. We're not doing a party. We're not? No, we're doing an exhibit. In the Penthouse. I'm calling it Second Silence. It's not a launch. It's a retrospective. It's the story of the building's rebirth, the story of the materials, the story of the work. That's the only story I'm willing to tell. There was a long pause. I heard him smile. That, Ms. Castillo, is why you are my partner. Book the caterers. I'll handle the press list. The guest list was precise. The Tribune's architecture critic, the editor from Architectural Digest, the partners from Granite Harbor, the high-net-worth buyers who had already bought units in the tower, unseen, and Marjorie, of course, and 3 others. I went to a small, expensive paper shop on Oak Street. I bought 3 cards, the same thick, heavy, cream-colored cardstock as the business card Marjorie had given me, the one that had started it all. I wrote them by hand, black ink, no pleasantries. The envelopes were addressed to Richard Castillo, Genevieve Castillo, and Ava Castillo. Inside, there was no invitation, just the Penthouse address, a date, and a time, and at the bottom, a single, handwritten line. Come if you want to see what real light looks like. The response from the city was immediate. The event was the hottest ticket in town. Vogue Living confirmed. The head of the Art Institute confirmed. The Second Silence exhibit was all anyone was talking about. I turned the Penthouse into a museum of its own creation. I banned big floral arrangements. I banned a DJ. We would have string musicians, playing quiet, minimalist pieces. Nico, who I had promoted to head of fabrication, had been working on something personal. They unveiled it in the entryway, hanging it in the center of the atrium, directly under the skylight I had designed. It's the mirrors, I whispered. It was a hanging sculpture, a cascade of hundreds of shards of broken mirror, the same ones from the shattered ballroom pile I had found years ago. Nico had suspended them on microfilaments. Each piece hung at a different, precise angle. In the center, a single, warm pinprick of light. The result was breathtaking. The single light was fractured, multiplied, and cast in 1,000 different directions. It was a galaxy of broken, glittering reflections. It was beautiful, and it was violent. It's a fractured family photo, Nico said quietly. It's the light you told me about. The one that split, instead of shining. It was the first thing our guests would see. My strategy was simple, polite, clinical, no accusations, no drama, just data. I set up stations, at each one, a before and after. Before, a large photo of the raw concrete box, gray and dead. After, the same angle, now showing the warm, white plaster walls and the olive tree. Before, an audio recording of the wind howling through the empty window frames, a high, lonely shriek. After, the silence, the perfect soft acoustics of the finished room. I wasn't just showing them a home, I was showing them the work, the proof. My phone, a new one now, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The family will consider your invitation. It was from my father. Not, we're so proud. Not, we're on our way. We will consider. Cold as wax paper. He was still trying to be the one granting the audience, weighing the PR value of attending against the humiliation of accepting. He was still playing king. Ava's response was, of course, public. She posted a new photo, a selfie, in a fitting room, wearing a spectacular floor-length, sequined red gown. It was a dress designed to suck all the light out of a room and wear it. The caption, "Sometimes you have to show up, even when you're not invited, just to remind them who the real star is." On my way to Chicago. Taking back the light. I stared at it. I almost laughed. She was so convinced I was her enemy. She couldn't even read a simple invitation. She was so used to crashing parties. She couldn't comprehend actually being on the list. She was, as always, making herself the main character of a story I was no longer in. The night before the event, I was alone in the penthouse. The city glittered 60 stories below, a sea of diamonds that felt, for the first time, like it was part of my world. The string quartet was doing a sound check. Nico's fractured light sculpture was turning slowly in the air currents, sending broken stars dancing over the olive tree. My phone rang. It was Ms. Byrne. "I'm not calling to wish you luck, Rosemary," she said. Her voice was pure business. "I'm calling about the Granite Harbor contract. I've been running the final numbers." "And?" I said, my stomach tightening. "And the acceleration clause, the one I wrote that their lawyers called an absurd hypothetical? The pull the rug clause?" "I remember." "Well, the final sales metrics, which are being certified tomorrow morning, combined with the verified press value metrics, you've done more than hit the co-ownership target. You've blown past the final trigger, the one that gives you 100%. I sat down on a low plaster bench. 100%, I whispered. "The sweat equity you contributed, as defined by the contract, has officially exceeded the total value of the asset. That 49% is old news. Harrison is a numbers man. He's not going to fight it. He's already preparing the final transfer document. The one that gives you full, unencumbered title. When? The moment the final sales are locked into the system, which, by my watch, happens to be tomorrow, right in the middle of your second silence event." My assistant's last text to me flashed in my mind. "RSVP list is officially over capacity. We have a wait list of 50. The fire marshal is going to be my new best friend. The reservation list was full. The final KPI was met. The clause was ready. Tomorrow." I wasn't just hosting an exhibit in the penthouse. I was taking delivery. The elevator doors opened not with a ding, but with a soft, expensive sigh. The guests stepped out, and the second silence began. They didn't step into a party. They stepped into a space. The penthouse was alive with the glow of a late-afternoon Chicago sun. The light, golden and thick, poured through the circular skylight and washed over the olive tree, making its green leaves look like spun gold. The tree stood in the center of the room, its roots grounded 60 stories in the sky, a living, breathing spine. The floors underfoot were reclaimed white oak, sanded just enough to be smooth, but left with the dark, swirling grain of their first life. The walls were not flat, sterile white. They were the hand-troweled plaster, warm and luminous, catching and holding the light, making the entire room feel like it was inhaling. The first thing they saw, right in the entryway, was the small, elegant, bronze plaque. It read, "Second Silence, curated by Rosemary Castillo." Just beyond it, Nico's sculpture turned slowly in the air currents. A galaxy of fractured light. Guests stopped, mesmerized, watching the thousands of broken mirror shards cast their shattered stars across the plaster. It was the only thing in the room that felt dangerous. It was beautiful, but it was a warning. The string quartet was playing a sparse, haunting melody by Arvo Part. Waiters moved silently with trays of champagne and water. There was no loud talk, just a collection of quiet, awestruck murmurs. The biggest wow point, as Harrison had predicted, was the VR station. In one corner, I had set up a simple headset. Guests would put it on and be transported, instantly, to the before. They were suddenly standing in the raw, concrete, howling box I had first seen. They would gasp, their hands flying to their faces. Then they'd pull the headset off and be standing in the after. The contrast, from gray, screaming death to warm, silent life, was the most powerful piece of marketing in the world. It was irrefutable. This was not decoration. It was resurrection. Then they arrived. I saw them before they saw me. The elevator doors sighed open, and the mood of the room shifted. Ava, in her red sequined dress, was a wound in the center of my calm, neutral space. She was an explosion of color and noise, flanked by my parents, who were dressed in their Scottsdale best, looking brittle and out of place. Ava was late, of course. She had timed her entrance for when she assumed the party would be in full swing, when she could make the biggest splash. She strode in, her eyes scanning not the art, not the architecture, but the cameras. She immediately intercepted the woman I had hired to be the evening's master of ceremonies, a lovely and professional events manager. "Hi," Ava said, her voice loud enough to carry. "I'm Ava Castillo, the sister. You need to announce me." The MC, who had been prepped by me, gave her a polite, firm smile. "Welcome. We're so glad you could make it. The exhibit is to your left. Please enjoy." "No, I mean," Ava's smile faltered. "You need to, announce me, so people know I'm here. I'm the inspiration." "As per Ms. Castillo's script," the MC said, her voice still impossibly polite. "There will be no personal announcements. Please enjoy the exhibit." Ava's face was a mask of thunder. My mother, seeing her daughter's failure, moved in for her own attack. She spotted me across the room, talking to the critic from the Tribune. Genevieve locked on, her society smile firmly in place. This was her arena. "Rosemary, darling!" she cried, her voice ringing with false warmth, and she rushed at me, arms open wide. I saw the photographer from Vogue turn, his lens seeking the drama. This was the shot, the prodigal daughter, the tearful mother, the grand reconciliation. I did not move. I did not step into the embrace. I simply stood my ground and put a professional hand on her elbow. Stopping her forward momentum, I smiled. A bright, public, camera-ready smile that did not touch my eyes. "Mother," I said, my voice clear and polite. "I'm so glad you could make it. The VR station is over there. I think you'll find it illuminating." I had not hugged her. I had not given her the scene. The photographer, seeing a non-event, turned away. My mother's smile faltered, her face tightening with a familiar, cold fury. She had been outplayed. It was time. The MC stepped onto the low, plaster-coated dais I had designed as a stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Rosemary Castillo." I walked up. The string quartet faded to silence. The room, 150 of the city's most important people, went still. I looked out. I saw Harrison, beaming. I saw Marjorie, in the back, her arms crossed, a small, fierce smile on her face. And I saw them, my father, my mother, and Ava, standing in a tight, angry triangle by the bar. I began. "Welcome to Second Silence," I said. My voice was amplified, but I kept it low. "I'm not going to talk for very long, because I believe this space should speak for itself. It has waited a long time to do so." I spoke for 7 minutes. I did not tell my story. I told the story of the materials. "We are taught," I said, "that value comes from what is new, from the perfect, the untouched, the glossy. We are taught to tear down the old and throw away the broken. This floor," I stamped my heel, "is from a barn that collapsed. This ceiling is from a railway that was abandoned. This light is from a ballroom that was shattered. We are surrounded by things that were told they were worthless. They were told they were scrap. They were told to be quiet." I looked across the room, at the people, their phones down, their eyes locked on me. My philosophy is simple. Soul Build is not about design. It's about listening. It's about giving a voice and a light to the parts of our world and ourselves that have been discarded. It's about finding the courage to hear the story in the things that are broken. What you are standing in is not a penthouse. It is a testament to the profound, defiant, and beautiful right to be heard. I finished. The music didn't swell. The script called for a single, low, ambient note from the cello. Just the sound of the room, breathing, the silence held. It was deep, profound. The guests were standing perfectly still, holding their breath. And into that perfect, hard-won silence, a voice, sharp and glittering and ugly. "You're welcome!" It was Ava. She was drunk. She was furious. She was standing in the middle of the room, her red dress blazing. "You're all welcome. She wouldn't be here without me. I am the broken thing she's talking about." The room inhaled. This was it. The drama. The gossip blog. Live. "If it wasn't for me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "If it wasn't for my party, you would be nothing. You would still be in Scottsdale, hanging my lights. I gave you your stupid story. I gave you this. This is my night." The room was frozen. Every eye was on me. My mother looked horrified. My father looked at the floor, and I just stood there. I let her words hang in the air. The ugliest, most out-of-place things in the room. I did not speak. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I looked at Ava. I held her gaze. Then, I calmly raised the small black remote I held in my hand. I aimed it at the massive white plaster wall behind me, and I clicked. The wall lit up. A projector I had hidden in the beams hummed to life. It was not a slideshow. It was a time-lapse. There was no sound. It was me. It was me, 2 years ago, covered in grime, in my old boots, in the Copper Finch. It was me, asleep at my desk at North and Nest. It was me, hauling a brick from a dumpster. It was me, in the freezing Humboldt Park workshop, my hands bleeding. It was me, in this very room. 6 months ago. Me, on a 40-foot scissor lift, hanging the first timber beam. It was Nico, welding, sparks flying. It was me, my hair in a bun, my face covered in plaster dust, troweling the wall she was now standing in front of. It was me and my team, at 2 a.m., eating pizza on the concrete floor. It was work. It was not a story. It was not a drama. It was not an artistic exaggeration. It was labor. Silent, irrefutable, grueling, real. The time-lapse played for 90 seconds. The only sound in the room was the click of the projector and Ava's ragged breathing. When it finished, the wall went black. The room was silent for one more beat, and then the applause started. It was not the roar I had heard at the Design Midwest conference. It was not the drunken cheering of my 18th birthday. It was slow. It was deep. It was profound. It started with one person, the Tribune critic, then Marjorie, then the whole room. It was a rolling, thundering wave of respect. They were not clapping for the speech. They were clapping for the time-lapse. They were clapping for the work. As the applause slowly died down, Harrison stepped forward. He took the microphone. "I think," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "that says it all. On behalf of Granite Harbor Partners, I want to thank Rosemary, not just for her vision, but for the labor that brought it to life." He smiled at the crowd. "And I am thrilled to officially announce that, as of this morning, the Valiant Towers pre-sales have hit 132% of our projected goal. This building, thanks to the Castillo effect, is officially the most successful luxury launch in Chicago history." A buzz went through the room. 132%. The numbers were staggering. Harrison raised his hand. "And on that note, I have one final piece of business. Ms. Byrne, if you would." A new kind of silence fell. Ms. Byrne, my lawyer, walked forward. She was not smiling. She was a professional, here to execute a contract. She was carrying a leather folio and a sealed, official-looking envelope. She was followed by a man in a suit, carrying a notary's briefcase. Harrison Justin read to me. When Ms. Castillo agreed to partner with us, she took a tremendous risk. She bet on herself. She contributed her sweat equity, and our contract had a very specific, very aggressive acceleration clause, which our lawyers assured me was a fantasy. They said no designer could ever meet it. He turned to me, a look of pure, unadulterated respect on his face. Well, as of 7 p.m. tonight, Rosemary Castillo's equity and her quantifiable PR value have not just met, but exceeded. The total valuation of this asset, the fantasy clause, has been triggered. He nodded to Ms. Byron. She opened the folio. She handed me a pen. Ms. Castillo, if you would. The notary stepped up, opened his book, and prepared his stamp. Harrison took the mic one last time. This, he said, his voice booming, is not a co-ownership. It is a full transfer of title. I am no longer your host. I am a guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please congratulate Rosemary Castillo, the sole and complete owner of this $10 million penthouse. Ms. Byrne handed me the final page. I signed. The notary pressed his stamp onto the paper. The thud of the seal was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was done. I looked up, my hand steady, holding the pen. Ava had turned the color of my plaster walls. My mother was holding onto my father's arm, and me. I just looked straight into the lens of the Vogue photographer, who was finally capturing the real shot, and I smiled. The sound of the notary's stamp was a gavel, a physical, finite thud that echoed in the sudden, absolute silence of the penthouse. The ink was on the paper. The title was mine. For a half-second, the entire room, the press, the buyers, Harrison, my family, was frozen in a collective, breathless tableau. Then, the flashbulbs. It was not a smattering. It was a supernova, a white-hot, blinding explosion of light, all aimed at me, standing on the dais, holding the pen. The clicks of the shutters sounded like a hailstorm. Rosemary! Ms. Castillo! Over here. But the Vogue photographer, the best in the room, was smarter. He didn't aim at me. He spun 180 degrees and aimed at my family. And he got the shot. He captured Ava, her mouth slightly open, her skin the color of wet chalk under the sequins. She was a statue, stunned into absolute silence, her entire, performative, red dress narrative instantly rendered irrelevant. He captured my mother, her hand flying not to her heart, but to the clasp of her expensive leather clutch, her knuckles white, her painted smile frozen in a rictus of pure, undiluted social horror. And he captured my father, who had, at long last, found something more interesting than his own reflection. He was studying the reclaimed white oak floor as if it held the secrets of the universe. The press surged, a wave of microphones and phones. Rosemary, how does it feel? Was this the plan all along? What will you do with it? Harrison, ever the showman, stepped back to the microphone, his arms raised. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all witnesses to history, but the night is not over. He gestured toward the entryway, where my assistant was quietly, efficiently, taking down the original, smaller bronze plaque from its hooks. An exhibit needs a curator, Harrison boomed, but a home needs a name. My assistant replaced the old plaque with a new one. It was larger, permanent, and bolted into the plaster. The light from Nico's sculpture danced across the freshly engraved letters. Castillo Penthouse, private residence and studio salon. The applause was, if possible, even louder. It was the legal, physical, permanent stamping of my name onto the Chicago skyline. Through the noise, I moved. The crowd parted for me. I was no longer an invisible girl, a ghost in a white dress. I was a solid object. I was the owner. I walked, not away from my family, but directly toward them. They were still in their triangle of shock, a toxic island in a sea of celebration. Ava looked up as I approached. Her eyes narrowed, searching for a new angle, a new fight. My mother was already composing her "We are so proud" face for the cameras. "Mother, father, Ava," I said. My voice was low, and they had to lean in to hear me, which made the press cameras surge again, desperate to capture the intimate moment. "Will you join me for a moment? There's a room I'd like to show you." They had no choice. To refuse, here, would be to admit defeat. "Of course, darling," my mother said, slipping her arm through mine, a proprietary, loving gesture for the cameras. I did not pull away. I simply walked, my pace forcing her to keep up. I led them away from the crowd, down a short hallway I had designed, the walls narrowing slightly. At the end, there was a single, frosted glass door. I pushed it open. It was not a room, it was a cube. It was a small, 10 by 10 space, built entirely of glass, cantilevered off the side of the building, hanging 60 stories above the city. The 3 walls facing the skyline were seamless. The floor was glass. It was like standing on air. There was no art. There was no furniture, save one. In the center, bolted to the floor, facing out toward the endless, glittering horizon of the city, was a single, empty chair. It was the chair from my sketchbook on the bus. The simple, elegant, empty chair I had drawn when I had nothing. I had finally built it. I closed the glass door, and the sound of the party vanished. We were in a high, silent, terrifying box of light. Ava looked at it, confused. "What is this? A closet?" "It's the light room," I said. My father, for the first time, spoke. The view is, my God." He was transfixed by the city below, by the sheer, terrifying power of the height. I gestured to the chair. "This chair," I said, my voice quiet in the glass box, "is for someone who has learned how to see, not for someone who just needs to be seen." The line, my line, the thesis of my entire life, landed in the air between us. Ava's face twisted. She finally understood. This was not a celebration. This was a verdict. You think you're so clever," she spat, her voice ugly. "You think this room makes you better than me? You're still just that pathetic girl in the background." She took a step toward me. "You still owe me. Ava." The voice was my mother's. It was not loud. It was not a shriek. It was flat. It was the sound of a string snapping. Ava froze. "Ava, enough," my mother said. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the chair, at the city. She had her hand on the glass wall. It's just enough." It was not an apology. It was not an admission of guilt. It was a surrender. The narrative was, for the first time in her life, utterly, completely, and publicly out of her control. The game was over. She had lost. I had not brought them here to fight. I had brought them here to close the file. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer. "I wrote these a long time ago," I said. I pulled out 3 thick, cream-colored envelopes, sealed, with wax. One was addressed Father, one was Mother, one was Ava. I did not hand them to them. I walked past them and placed the 3 letters, side by side, on the small, built-in plaster shelf next to the glass door. "I'm not angry," I said, and I was surprised to find it was true. "I am just finished." I turned to face them, the 3 of them, trapped in a box of my creation. "I am not playing the background anymore. I am not a supporting role in your story. This is my home now. You are welcome to be here, as guests, but you will never again be the owners of my story. What happens next is up to you." I opened the door and stepped back into the party, leaving them alone in the sky, with their reflections, the empty chair, and the truth. I re-entered the main room. The vibe was electric. Harrison found me instantly, a fresh champagne in his hand. "Rosemary, my God, what a night. A masterstroke," he said, beaming. He was already calculating the new, higher ROI. "Listen, the board is, well, they're beyond thrilled. They're already talking about the next one, a new line. The Castillo Skyline Collection, a dozen penthouses, all across the country, New York, Miami. Mr. Harrison, I said, taking the champagne. I will have my lawyer call yours, but my new terms are different. Different how? Anything. You can have anything. I will, I said. I will require full creative control, a 60-40 stake, and a quid pro quiet clause. He blinked. A what? A quid pro quiet clause, I said, smiling. It means I retain the right to not talk, the right to stay silent, the right to let the work speak, and not have to be the dancing monkey for the PR team every single time. My silence is now a commodity, Mr. Harrison, and I am charging for it. He stared at me for a long second, and then he threw his head back and laughed, a real booming laugh. I'll be damned, he said, raising his glass. You are brilliant. We'll have the paperwork drawn up. I left him and walked through the crowd. I found Nico, who was trying to look bored while simultaneously vibrating with excitement. Boss, they said, their green hair almost glowing. That was not bad. Nico, I said, you're not my intern anymore. As of Monday, you're the head of fabrication at Castillo Atelier. Full salary, medical, dental, and a bonus. I'll have the contract for you tomorrow. Nico's bored facade shattered. They just stared, their eyes wide. Okay. Boss, yeah, okay. I found Marjorie. She was standing by my olive tree, her hand resting on its bark, her back to the room. She was looking out at the city. I stood next to her. You did it, she whispered. Her eyes were wet. The silver-haired, steel-spined Marjorie Vale was crying. No, I said, my voice thick. We did it. You left a blanket on my shoulder. She smiled, wiping her eye. I knew you were cold. You saved my life, Marjorie. No, she said, squeezing my arm. You just needed a door. You built the whole damned house yourself. The party was winding down. The press was leaving, their memory cards full, their stories written. The guests were disappearing, their heads full of my name. Harrison approached me one last time. One more thing, he said. A small gift. From the team. A symbol. He handed me a small, velvet-wrapped object. It was a key. It wasn't gold. It wasn't glittery. It was heavy in my hand. It was made of recycled, blackened steel. The same rebar I used to pull from dumpsters. It had been forged, hammered, and shaped. Nico's handiwork was all over it. It was the key to the penthouse. By 1 a.m., they were all gone. The caterers, the musicians, the press, Harrison, my family, even Nico and Marjorie. I was alone. I was standing in the center of the Castillo penthouse. Silence, the second silence. I walked to the massive 30-foot-wide glass wall that led to the main terrace. I put my hand on the cold steel handle. I slid the heavy glass door open. A sound rushed in, a sound I hadn't heard all night, the sound of the wind, a cold, clean, sharp, 60-story wind. It rushed into the room, pure and new, smelling of the lake and the sky. It hit my olive tree, and the leaves, they rustled. It wasn't a roar, it was a whisper, a soft green, living sound that filled the entire $10 million space. It was the sound of a key in a lock. It was the sound of a house, finally, welcoming its owner home. A week later, I held the dinner. It was not a party. The press was not invited. The only sound was the low, ambient music of the city itself, 60 stories below. I cooked. I made a simple rustic meal, roasted vegetables, good bread, a braised lamb. I set the table myself. My one, long, reclaimed oak table, the one I had built with Nico. My guests arrived in ones and twos. Harrison, from Granite Harbor, who looked strange and uncomfortable in a sweater instead of a suit, but who had come, bearing an incredible bottle of wine. Sal, the foreman from the Lark Line, who crushed my hand in his and told me the penthouse was solid, Marjorie, who brought me a new, small sketchbook. For the next one, and Nico, who just brought themselves, which was always enough. They were my new family, the one I had built. They were laughing, drinking, talking about work, about life. They were real. The elevator sighed open, and my old family walked in. They were, for the first time, the ones who were late. They were the ones interrupting. My father, Richard, looked small in the massive space. My mother, Genevieve, was wearing a simple dark blue dress, her face pale, her society armor visibly cracked. And Ava, she was not wearing the red sequined dress. She was wearing a simple, plain black wool dress. Her hair was pulled back. She wore no makeup. I had never, in my entire life, seen her face so bare. The laughter from my table stopped. Marjorie put her hand on my arm, a silent, steadying pressure. "You came," I said. It was a statement of fact. We read your letters," my father stammered. He was holding them. The 3 thick, cream-colored envelopes. I had not seen them open them. I had left them in the light room, but they had, apparently, gone back for them. "I didn't think you would," I said. "Well," my mother said, her voice thin. "We did." I looked at my real family, at Harrison, Sal, Nico, Marjorie. "Everyone, this is Richard, Genevieve, and Ava." And then I looked back at them. "This is my team." The introductions were awful, stiff, awkward, a collision of 2 worlds that should never have met. "Please," I said, gesturing to the 3 empty chairs I had left at the end of the table. "Sit." They sat. The dinner continued. But the energy was gone. My team tried. Nico told a story about a bad weld. Sal argued with Harrison about the price of steel. But the 3 Castillos at the end of the table were a black hole, absorbing the light, the warmth, the conversation. Finally, I put my fork down. The quiet click of silver on ceramic was as loud as the notary's stamp. Everyone stopped. I looked at my parents. I looked at Ava. "The letters," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the perfect acoustics of the room. They were not an invitation for a negotiation. They were not an accusation. They were just the files, what silence learned, what the shadow learned, what it means to choose love. I took a sip of water. I am not asking for an apology. I don't need one. An apology is a request for me to make you feel better. I am done with that. I am just done. I built my house on my own river. You are sitting in it. My mother looked down at her hands. My father just stared at the centerpiece. But Ava looked at me. Her bare face, stripped of its makeup and its confidence, was terrible to see. It was the face of a stranger. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and then another, and then she shattered. It was not her fake, performative. I'm the star crying. It was a silent, ugly, painful collapse. Her shoulders shook. She made a small, choking sound. She whispered. "I read your letter. The one you called, What the Shadow Learned." She looked up at me. Her eyes flooded, and her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated, newfound pain. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know. I didn't know that being looked through, I didn't know it hurt this much." She wasn't talking about herself. She was, for the first time in her life, talking about me. She finally understood. Not the party, not the dress, but the feeling. The feeling of being invisible. The feeling she had. Right now, at this table, surrounded by my life, my team, my success. She was the ghost. She was experiencing the one thing I had wished on no one, and she was doing it in my house. She looked at me, desperate, a child, waiting for me to fix it, to hug her, to tell her it was okay, to make the pain stop. My team was frozen, horrified. witnesses to something too raw for a dinner party. I did not move. I did not embrace the drama. I did not comfort her. I simply held her gaze, my face calm, and I tilted my head, just slightly, toward the hallway, toward the glass cube hanging in the sky. "The light room is open," I said, my voice soft, but firm. "The chair is empty. Sit, if you are ready to learn how to see." It was not forgiveness. It was an assignment. Ava's sob caught in her throat. She understood, and then my father spoke. It was just easier," he said, his voice thick, speaking to his plate. Ava. She was always easier to take a picture of. She was bright. She knew how to smile for the camera. You were always questioning. You were complicated. It was the first true thing he had ever said to me. He had always preferred the photogenic one. My mother's hand was wrapped around her wine glass, her knuckles white. I hated the gossip," she whispered. "In Scottsdale, what people said. It mattered. It was easier for everyone to be happy, for the pictures to be perfect. I was afraid of the truth. It was ugly. Afraid of scandal more than the truth, and there it was, the confessions, the two tiny, rotten seeds that my entire childhood had grown from. Shallowness and cowardice. The air was clear. The poison was out. Nico and Marjorie and Sal and Harrison, they all sat in stunned, respectful silence. They were witnesses to the rebuilding of a family's foundation. I looked at the three of them, my old family, broken, sad, and finally, terribly, honest. "All right," I said. I stood up. I walked to the end of the table. "This is the last time we will speak of this, ever." I looked at my parents. "You are welcome in my home, as guests, but there are rules. You will not give interviews. You will not set the record straight. You will not use my name, or my work, or this penthouse, to fuel your social life, or your apologies. Ava, you will not post about me. You will not tag me. You will not use me as a story. This." I swept my hand across the room, at my life. "This is not for you. It is mine." I let the words land. "If you break these rules, even once, this door," I pointed to the elevator, "will close, and it will not open again. Do you understand?" My father, for the first time, looked me in the eye. He looked at the woman who owned a $10 million penthouse, the woman who had just been confessed to. He nodded. "Yes, Rosemary, we understand." My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. I turned my back on them and faced the rest of the table, my team, my real family. "Now," I said, my voice suddenly bright, warm, and full of energy. "I have an announcement," Marjorie smiled. "The Room for One scholarship, which has been funding 2 internships at the atelier for the last year, is expanding, starting tomorrow." I looked at Harrison. "Thanks to a very generous donation from our partners at Granite Harbor." Harrison raised his glass, smiling. "The fund is now endowed, and this penthouse," I said, "will be its headquarters, 1 weekend a month. It will become the Salon for Light. We will be bringing in students, new designers, kids from the trade schools, the ones who can't afford the conferences, and we will give them a seat at this table. We will show them the work. We will turn on the lights for them." The table erupted in applause, real applause. Nico was cheering. Ava, her face still blotchy, her voice hoarse, spoke up from the end of the table. I want to help." I looked at her. The old Ava would have been pitching a reality show. This Ava looked small. "I mean it," she said. I'll do whatever." I held her gaze. I thought about the hours I had spent hanging lights, sweeping floors, bleeding. "Okay," I said. "Nico is hiring fabrication assistants for the new hotel project. It's 6 a.m. You'll be carrying materials, heavy ones, not holding a microphone. She looked at me, stunned. She was probably expecting to run the socials for the charity. She took a deep breath. She looked at her manicured hands. She nodded. Okay, she whispered. When do I start? I nodded. Nico will send you the address. The dinner ended. My real family left in a wave of hugs and laughter. My old family left in a cloud of quiet, exhausted, fragile silence. I walked them to the elevator. My mother stopped, her hand on my arm. Rosemary, it's beautiful. I know, I said. Good night. The elevator doors closed. I was alone. I walked out onto the terrace. Chicago was a sea of stars at my feet, a galaxy of light and noise and life. The wind was cold. I looked at the bronze plaque by the door, my name catching the light from the city. Castillo Penthouse. I thought about that girl, barefoot, walking away from a party, with $600 and a sketchbook. I thought about the girl in the coffee shop, being snapped at. I thought about the empty chair I had drawn on a bus, and the empty chair that was now waiting in the light room. I took a deep breath, and the cold, clean air filled my lungs. It's time, I whispered to the city. It's time to turn the lights on for others. I turned and walked back inside. The massive glass door slid shut behind me. The sound a soft, definitive hiss. The penthouse was silent, but in the corner of my eye, the glass cube, the light room, stayed lit. The chair was there, waiting. The storm was over. The drama was done. It was not a victory won by destroying them. It was a peace chosen by building me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are listening from. So please comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a little extra support by hitting the hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.